partnership. So it worked out okay. But, it's been my experience that all businesses have growing pains. And what I've said, even to my colleagues, is failing fast, but learning faster is really, really important. And so even though I had 3 startups and they exited to good buyers, the first 2 experiences were very, very profitable just because I learned a ton, put that back in play for the third, and you just get smarter over time. Alex?
Sure. So my path was a little bit different, yet similar at the same time. Uh, Cash, as also first generation immigrant, and I was really in the country by myself, cash flow has always been really important to me. And so I told my manager at my old job, because I was there for many years, that he doesn't need to worry about losing me for one of their competitors. It was a great place to work. Still, the company is around and they're great. I'm gonna leave when I'm ready to start my own business. And because the relationship we had and the transparency, we're able to work it out so that I continued working as a contractor as I was experimenting with different things that me and my partner Michael wanted to do. So uh, we were we were basically doing consulting work. We were doing a number of different things while I was working. So we were to build up the momentum. And in 2010, when both of us formally quit our jobs and were working full time, I still stayed as a contractor at my old job for a year and a half to continue the cash flow. Because at the time, now I'm not embarrassed to admit that I moved, my wife and I were getting ready to get married, and I moved in. So with Michael and my wife, we all lived together in a tiny condo because we wanted to save money, and we were living off of the money I was making as a contractor, my old job, working crazy hours because I didn't have to come to that office. I could do it from our new office. So whatever we were earning at the early days of InfoTrust, we can immediately reinvest in growth and not pay ourselves because the money was coming from, another source. And that certainly made a really big difference. And it's kind of funny how that really impacted how I feel about cash flow in general, because we've been able to grow to this year, we're crossing 20 million in revenue without raising any outside capital. We're 100% self-funded with no debt. And that's a pretty exciting accomplishment by itself. So maybe because freedom of making a choice, I'm not saying I'm against raising capital, but when we're ready to do that, it's important to me that we make it on our terms, and being able to grow this far without raising capital is pretty exciting.
So Alex, just to kind of piggyback on that, some entrepreneurs measure success by how much capital they've raised or how many accelerators they've been through. What's your perspective on that? Just in terms of when to raise capital, when it makes sense, and Brian, I'd be curious your take on that too, in terms of kind of, it sounds like you wish you'd taken a more QCA type investor along the way. When do you guys think is the right time for a company to consider that? Because there are certainly strings attached, right?
Absolutely.
So my perspective is really simple. Early in my career as an entrepreneur, I met a fascinating professor at London Business School who wrote a book, Customer Funded Businesses, who outlined models for how you can launch a business, and by being extremely creative and smart about cash flow, you can fund your business through this cash flow. Because statistically speaking, raising capital does not guarantee success. There is no statistics that show that the fact that you were funded is going to make it easier for you to grow. When is the best time to fund? Probably this question can be better answered by people, like Brian, who have actually gone through this process. But my answer would be really simple. You need to fall in love with your clients and figure out what the clients need. Get out of you know, as Steve Blank, the father, the quote unquote father of Eric Ries, who wrote Lean Startup, says you have to get out of the office and meet the clients, figure out what they need and how to add value. And if you can add value to your clients without raising capital, great. If you need to raise capital, there's a lot of fantastic models, with Lean Startup being like the book that so many generations of entrepreneurs have been using for how to execute these processes. But I think the most important thing has to start with understanding who your customers are and what value you can bring, and focusing on this value, not on generating capital. Because there's a lot of capital out there. It's not, my understanding is that it's not, when everything else is worked out, finding capital once you have customers and you know what problem you're solving, it's going to be a lot easier to find capital.
Yeah, just to piggyback on a couple of those points that Alex made, one of the points of advice that I heard when I was building my business was the best time to get capital is anytime you can. And I found that not to be true, with all due respect to the person giving that advice. By the way, I was a prospective investor. And so I think the best time to get capital is when you really need it and when you've shown you deserve it. And the other thing I think that's really important is just ask yourself a good hard question. Is my business growth trajectory such that I can provide a return back to those capital partners? Sometimes that's going to be yes, and sometimes that answer is going to be no. We ended up bootstrapping or building our business without capital partners once we rebooted the business, simply because we found that we found a secondary revenue channel that gave us good size injections of cash. And so consequently, we were surprised to learn that we didn't need the capital that we thought, because our revenues started ticking up. So I just think you have to be very, very sober about it. And I would leave you with just one important thought. Hopefully you've heard this at some point, but as you're thinking about incubating and growing your business, you want to think about various series of proofs. So, you know, a concept, a testable concept, would customers say they use it? Would they spend money on it, any kind of money? Would they then spend a premium dollar on it? Would they actually come back and buy it a second time? Would they even buy an additional product? And so we had these series of proofs that we grew through. And I would encourage you, regardless of your business, think about how to move your business along to those different echelons, and then ask yourselves, at what point do I need a capital partner? And just have a plan for that.
That's great. Anybody have any questions from our group here? All right, I'm gonna keep going, but jump in if you guys have anything. So you both mentioned, Alex and Brian, that you have co-founders. Alex, to be able to live with your co-founder during the lean times with your families is that's a lot of togetherness while also running a business. And Brian, you made reference to your co-founder as well. On the legal side, what we see a lot is where it's not a perfect fit. Sometimes you've got people where it's not a perfect fit. Other times we've got a solo founder that feels like they're kind of desperate to find maybe a CTO or a co-founder, or they're not going to be investable. Can you guys talk about how you kind of built those relationships and the value of those relationships for entrepreneurs?
Sure. Alex, I'll go first this time and then flip to you. So I think it's a wonderful question, Vance. And so the first thing I can tell you is my co-founder and I worked together at our second startup. To be honest, we didn't even like each other initially, but as I got to know him, I found out that he was a terrific person. And some of the things that bothered him that I viewed as idiosyncrasies were actually my own issues. He would show up at 11 o'clock and say, "Hey, what are we having for lunch today?" And I would say, man, where you been? I've been in the gutter swinging for, 4 hours or 5 hours. We had different shifts, but he was an engineer and I was a content and a sales and a business person. And so we had complementary skill sets. And so as you think about a co-founder, the reality is I think it has to begin with a pretty healthy self-assessment. What am I good at? What am I not so good at? We're all not good at a lot of things. And it just so happened that Greg was really, really good at the things that were not necessarily my strength. And maybe a little bit of the reverse was true. But, I've been married to a wonderful wife. I've always joked that I blessed with two wives. I have a wife of 32 years at home, and then I have a work wife that I worked a number of years together. And that's a joke, of course. But I had a great co-founder, and I really think that partnership was a real catalyst to our success. Alex?
You know what's amazing, Brian? We've never met before, but I think there's so much similarity in our stories. I would really like us to continue this relationship because
Sounds good.
It's very similar in my case. So Michael and I mean, we had relationship before the business, and we have extremely complementary skills and complementary personalities. I'm a geek. I'm an engineer by training. I spent my entire life. We're in the marketing technology business. So I spent my career prior to finding the business in working for a very large software company in system integration space. So nothing to do with marketing, but it had to do with big complex systems. Michael was a marketing guy who loved speaking. I could care less about public speaking or doing trainings or speaking at different events and so on. That's just not my thing. Michael gets energy from this. And so the fact that we're so complementary made a huge difference. Also, we're really into using DISC personality profile in InfoTrust. And what's really funny is that Michael and my wife, Michael's my partner, and my wife are very similar, and their profile is completely opposite of me. I am, and for those of you who know DISC, I'm a 99D and a very high I, and very low C and S. Michael and my wife are exact opposite. And so there's definitely something about the fact that, knock on wood, I've now been married for almost 10 years and I plan on continuing to stay married. And so that's why I really like Ryan's story, because I feel like something about both the skills and the personality has really made it work, and trust.
Do you both feel like the having a co-founder was necessary for the success of your business? What would you say to a solo entrepreneur?
Alex, you go first.
Sure. I'm really big in masterminds and networking with entrepreneurs. Unfortunately, I know very few entrepreneurs who are successful with a co-founder, because I feel like you almost need to have a relationship with the person first, because it's such a big deal to have this ultimate trust with the person, that to try to find somebody who is going to be a match where you can hire some of those skills or pay for those skills in some shape or form is really difficult. And also, quite a few entrepreneurs get in trouble because they make their family members their partners. And if the family dynamics get in the way, I've seen that in definitely more than one or two cases, that also becomes an issue. And so that's just been my experience. So I would say it's absolutely not a requirement. Most of the entrepreneurs, extremely successful entrepreneurs I've met, they do not have partners, but over the years, they were able to make up the skills that they're missing by finding advisors and finding people in the community who can train them. And also, if you need sometimes you can find extremely experienced entrepreneurs who've exited or who may have more time, who may be willing to spend time with you to help you solve some problems, or who may help you recruit the right person. And trust me, there are people like that out there. And when you figure out what you want to do, or if you're really authentic in why you want to build a business and what you want to accomplish, and if you, I think if you approach this from like with the right attitude and perspective, you can connect with some absolutely amazing people who would be willing to give you their time for free because somebody helped them along the way and they want to give back. Like, just to give an example, one of my mentors is the co-founder of Priceline.com. And I met him at a conference. I came to him and I said, you know what? I've never connected to, he spoke about entrepreneurial legacy, to somebody at the level I connected with your presentation. Can I get your email? Can we stay connected? And now he's visited us in Cincinnati. I met with my entire team, and because he's so, I mean, he ran like 13 different businesses, and he's no longer involved with running businesses. His whole life is about supporting entrepreneurs, and he doesn't even charge for this work because he doesn't need money anymore. He has enough money for the next 5 lifetimes. And so there's definitely people like that, and sometimes finding somebody like that, just keeping your, or asking people who can introduce you to somebody like that may go a really long way instead of trying to find a partner.
And I would just add, Vance, that I agree with Alex's point 100%, exactly what I was going to say, and that if you have a great co-founder relationship that exists, but forcing a fit is almost the worst thing you can do. And you've probably seen, those of you, we've seen partnerships dissolve. And so I would not try to go there. But if you harken back to what I said earlier, something that you might think about is still broadly applicable, even if you're a solo entrepreneur, and that's find people with complementary strengths and make sure you have the relationships where they can speak truth back to you. When we developed our vision and mission, we also parlayed that into cultural values. And one of our cultural values was to communicate as peers, regardless of your position. And so you just need people who can present opposing ideas. You're just not going to get it right all the time. Co-founder relationships, when really healthy, have this ability, like a good marriage or any good partnership, or even great friendship, to speak truth and sort of, help you think through opposing dynamics. You need the right set of partnerships, employees, et cetera, as Alex mentioned, to do that if you're a solo entrepreneur. I think the onus there is a little more important, but by all means, don't force a fit if it's not there.
So a lot of the, timing is so important in so many different aspects of being an entrepreneur. And Alex, I know this is true of you. Brian, I'm not sure it's true of you, but you had a quote day job while you were initially starting the business. And a lot of entrepreneurs that I work with, have the day job. They've kind of been tinkering at night and weekends on the startup. When's the right time to make the jump to full time? A lot of folks too have families, kids, those kind of things. It's a really tough decision, definitely a leap of faith. What do you guys think about that?
Brian, want to go first?
Sure. Yeah, I'll jump in this time. So when Greg and I bought our business back, I joked, even though, the idea was mine, I'm really the 4th employee in the company, because we got our 2 sales guys back and Greg had to jump back in the business. The business was actually better off without me, just because we needed to continue to build out the product and we needed to build out the sales pipeline. And so it was very providential. I found consulting opportunities so I only took benefits from the company once we bought it back. But, I found nice consulting gigs. So I worked at the company part-time for really no pay, just benefits. But then it became clear, and I was still providing value, but I was not burdening the business with my salary. And so finally it got to a point where we had sold enough and it looked like customers were returning that I could jump back into the business. It was still very risky, but did that full time. And so each situation is so unique. And notice I said, it also depends where you are on the build out of your application. If you are in fact an application centered business and your sales pipeline. So the circumstances will ultimately dictate that. And I think that's a little unique for each business. So that's our story, but with that, I'll flip it to Alex. It'd be interesting to hear what he has to say.
Thank you. Oh, I really do not have, there's no perfect solution. I think it is different for each situation. In our case, there's a couple of things contributed to the timing. First, we were waiting out for the recession, so we jumped in full time in 2010 because we really wanted things to kind of stabilize a little bit after recession, because we had no experience running a business and we're really concerned about starting the business right at the peak of the recession. And also by that time, I do not remember how much, but I believe the first year of our business we made, because we're in the consulting business, we made something like $60,000 or $80,000. So we had some revenue already coming in from contracts we were able to secure while working part-time in the business. But then at one point, it was really the decision of we need to burn the bridges and do it now. Otherwise, if we keep continuing on until we, let's say, we're more comfortable with 100K a year or more, it's just not going to happen. And so it was a little bit of revenue coming in. The economy seemed like it's doing a little bit better. And so it was a little bit of calculated risk, and then really kind of burn the boats and quit. But again, it was a calculated burning boats because I was able to work out a relationship with my previous job to stay on as a contractor and work from our office. We got a tiny office at CMC off of Reed Hartman, and I did not need to do the work from my full-time job office in Loveland. So I didn't have to worry about doing the full-time job during the day and then kind of moonlight in the evening. I could do a lot of the contract work in the evening and focus on growing the business and taking sales meetings during the day. Because of the relationship I developed with my old job, we're able to work it out. So I think the cash flow, again, going back, and again, maybe it's just my personality, but either understanding the need or understanding where the cash flow is going to come from. So when you're ready to jump in, you can control the risk.
Great. All right, I'm just going to let there be awkward silence till somebody else asks a question now. So.
Yeah, this is Cedric. I have a question. So can you both talk through like some of the biggest challenges you had up front and what are the lessons learned from those challenges?
Yeah, I'll go first. I think, Cedric, it's a great question, first off. And I think picking the right people, I think that's really, really huge. One thing as I reflect back on my experience, I think reaching for talent is really, really important. And there are times where, I had somebody who was really talented and somebody who was maybe less talented and really affordable. Sometimes I opted for the more affordable person, and that was not always the best choice. On the flip side, however, one of the things my co-founder and I decided to do was build a culture that was highly, highly collaborative. And I'm going to use a bad word here, apologies in advance, but there's a wonderful book by Bob Sutton out of Stanford called The No Asshole Rule. Mm-hmm. And basically he does evidence-based management science, and they showed how, the wrong talent selection, if somebody's toxic, it can kill your organization. And so sometimes if someone's super talented, sometimes that comes with a little baggage, ego, they're culture killers. So talent selection for me was one of the things that I was always trying to get right. And so we ultimately said that we loved talent and intellect, but they needed to be a high collaborator and also have a really high work rate. They needed to be a grinder. And so finding, sometimes reaching for talent that you feel like you can't afford is the right decision, but beware of, go deep. Alex mentioned the personality profile testing, and look hard at those things, because the wrong person can kill your culture. And when I look back on my experiences, I still think that's just always a big challenge, regardless of the scale.
It's amazing how like I said, I've never met Brian in my life, but I agree with everything he said 100%. Not only that, but we have don't be an asshole in our core values. Like, seriously, I kid you guys not. And I definitely think, I did not expect that finding people is going to be as difficult as it turned out to be. When we started the business, I was very involved in the technical community with different user groups and meetups and so on. And I thought that's not going to be an issue at all. We need to focus on sales and so on. Turned out that finding people is the most important thing. And to this day, I would say the most difficult thing that I've not completely overcome is letting people go. Because every once in a while you have to do this, no matter, and it's a right business decision. And I'm preparing to let somebody go right now in a couple of weeks. And it's always hard. For some people, it's not as hard, but for me, because I care about people and I really care about culture, it's always a very difficult thing to do. And I hate doing this. I mean, there have been a couple of times when I had to let people go when they violated cultural values, when that was an easy decision for me. Like one guy, young engineer, he was abusive. He was saying stupid stuff in front of women. I mean, that was easy, like, boom, you're gone. But sometimes when it's a business decision and the person is just not where we need that person to be as a team member, but it's a good person, that makes it a lot more difficult. And so I really wish I could offer an advice. The only thing I can share is having mentors. For example, right now in our organization, we're fortunate to have somebody who spent his first career at Procter & Gamble for 30 years, a very experienced executive. And so having people you can go as a leader can go to role play. So it's not just an HR decision, because you don't want to go just by the book of HR. Yes, you have to be compliant, but you also need to be human, and you need to figure out how to do those things in the most human way possible. And so being able to tap into somebody's experience when you're letting somebody go and when you're making really difficult decisions, in my mind, is probably one of the most difficult things that sometimes we have to do as business leaders.
Great question, Cedric.
It's a great question.
I think we've maybe got time for one more. Does anybody else have anything?
If not, I can share something real quick.
Please.
So a couple of months ago too, I was watching a webinar with like 2,000 other people where Mark Cuban was interviewed. And one thing he shared is that to this day, and I mean, everybody knows Mark Cuban, he is committed to outlearning anybody and everybody out there. And Mark Cuban doesn't need to prove anything to anybody anymore. I mean, he can chill for the rest of his life, but he's committed to learning. And one thing I've definitely learned spending a lot of time with different entrepreneurs is that it's a nonstop process of, you have to be committed to learning, because as the business grows, the needs that business puts on you as a leader constantly change, and you need to be able to keep up with the growth of the business. And so you need to keep learning to grow as a leader, because your problems are going to change. So you need to keep learning so you can find answers to these problems. And the bootcamp is an incredible resource. There are many different places where you can go to learn. I'm more than happy to share my experience in this area, but you must be committed to learning, to reading books, to meeting people, and it has to be successful, especially in this day and age when when things change so exponentially fast. You cannot think that you're there, you've arrived, and you can relax from learning point of view. So you have to kind of embrace the lifelong learner in you and make it a part of your everyday life, if you will. And the other thing I can say real quick is how important networking is. And not just networking, because I'm an introvert. I hate networking, but connecting with people. Before I could qualify for organizations like entrepreneurs organizations, I joined Chamber of Commerce. I'm still in the Chamber of Commerce roundtable. So surrounding yourself with experienced entrepreneurs and ideally people who are much more successful than you so you can learn from them is critically important. And there are so many different groups in our community, at the Chamber and in different organizations that I would really encourage you don't go to different networking events just for the sake of networking. You're not going to build relationships, but the best relationships are built in small groups. So finding every possible way to participate in small groups where you can learn and you can also support others is tremendously valuable.
Thanks, Alex, and thanks, Brian, both of you guys for sharing so much. Scott, I think we're out of time. Are we handing the ball back to you?
Yeah. Thank you, Vance. Thanks so much for moderating. Alex and Brian, you make Queen City Angels proud. Boot camp alum, highly successful. We would like to think that we played a small part in your success. So congratulations to you. Thanks a lot for.
Hey, Scott, can I say one thing in closing?
What's that?
Can I say one thing in closing?
Yes, please, Brian.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, I just, again, wanted to applaud each of you for taking this important step. Setbacks are par for the course. Just plow through them, overcome them. And the other thing I just wanted to compliment all of you, it's really nice to have this gallery view and see such diversity. It did not look like this many years ago. And so to see gender, race, ethnicity, culture, just so well represented here makes me excited for the future. So Alex and I are both in your corner and we applaud your taking this important step of boot camp. Wish you all the success in the world.
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, if I can also add just one real quick. I believe Tim and Norm are going after us, and I would really encourage you guys to connect with these two speakers. They're some of the most progressive entrepreneurs in our community. They're absolutely amazing leaders. And so I'm fortunate to have Tim as my friend, and I've learned so much from him over the years. It's incredible.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Alex.
Thanks, Alex.
So we'll go ahead and get started with the second panel session. Mark Sims from KMK Law is our moderator. KMK has been a huge sponsor and supporter of Queen City Angels for many, many years. Tim Rettig and Norm Damaris are panelists.
Sorry to interrupt, but could you hold for just a second?
Sure.
I'm closing the breakout rooms and everybody's in the process of coming back right now. So
Okay.
I just want to make sure they get this overview as well.
Okay.
Oh, get rid of that picture.
You're not talking about Tony Shipley now, are you, Jeffrey?
Come on, man.
Hi, Jeff.
Scott, are the participants going to get the decks, the presenters' decks?
Yeah, with your permission, Sally, of course.
No, I just, at the last session, I was talking about something in there and the contact information, so I just wondered if that was going to be the case.
Yeah, I'm going to be sending out release forms to the speakers to make sure it's okay for us to distribute any materials to them.
All right.
So,
Okay, everybody that was, everyone that was in a breakout room is now back. So Scott, if you wanted to give an overview and introduce everybody, we'll work to switch everybody over again.
Sure. So some of you folks are coming back from breakout rooms. This is our second in the Ask the Entrepreneur panel sessions. Mark Sims from KMK Law is our moderator. KMK Law, it's been a long time supporter of Queen City Angels. We really appreciate all the work that they've done with us over the years. Tim Rettig and Norm Damaris are our panelists. I've gotten to know Norm quite a bit over the last few months. Tim has been a great supporter of Queen City Angels as a guest speaker. This is probably, what, about the fourth time I think you've spoken now, Tim. So really appreciate you coming back. Both Norm and Tim exited using ESOPs. And I think that's a very interesting way to exit. And they've got some great experience that they can impart about how they did that. Tim is on a second or third go around on doing that as an exit strategy. And without any further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you, Mark Sims. Thank you. The rest of you are going to be placed into breakout rooms, so bear with us as we start to move people around a little bit.
Thank you, Scott. Hey, Scott, is there a way for people to ask questions?
Yes, there's a chat feature down at the bottom, and we'll monitor that.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. As Scott said, my name is Mark Sims. I'm a partner at Keating Youthing and Kleekamp. Our firm does have a long relationship with Queen City Angels, both in working with them on various issues, working with companies that they've invested in, and participating in this boot camp over the years. I know you guys have been through a couple of days and of getting a lot of information, and hopefully this panel will be a chance for you to hear some of how some of those concepts that you heard about have been applied in real life, and also give you a chance to ask some questions of a couple of guys who are very experienced entrepreneurs and have been very successful in their businesses. So first, and I'm looking around, I'm not sure if I see Norman, are you on?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay, hey Norm.
Good afternoon.
So our panelists today, as Scott said, are Tim Rettig and Norman Damaris. Tim is currently an owner and CEO of Intrust IT, which is a company that he founded back in 1992. And I think he also recently purchased another business that he is in the process of growing and rebranding, and he can speak to that. Norm has started, I think, at least 7 companies that I think, and notably Tier 1 Performance, which I think started out in an incubator in Northern Kentucky and now is a kind of a national business. And I think Norman is also currently a founder and CEO of a company called Entrep. I think, first of all, Tim, why don't you and Norman both, and maybe Tim, you start out just telling a little bit about yourself, your businesses, and kind of your history as an entrepreneur.
Sure. Thanks, Mark. Yes. So my father actually started a software company in the 70s, which is very unusual. There weren't that many software companies around in the 70s. And he exited the company 16 years ago via an ESOP, Employee Stock Ownership Plan. And that's what we're going to be talking about today. There are stock option plans, and there are ways to have your employees buy into and have ownership, or you to give equity to your employees. But this is a very specific type of plan that is actually written into the US tax code and has a bunch of tax benefits. It was actually created in the 50s by a gentleman by the name of Louis Kelso, and it was put into tax law in 1974 as part of the ERISA Act that Ford signed into law. So it's been around for quite some time. and we'll get into some of the benefits of it, both to you, society, your employees, and that through this whole discussion, I'm sure. I started transitioning my company to my employees last year. And then what I'm doing is kind of my second act is I'm buying companies from retiring owners and then transitioning them, some scaling them in some fashions, adding technology to them, and then transitioning them through ESOPs as well and employee ownerships. And then I'm involved in some different funds that do that as well. They go out specifically to buy operating companies and convert them into ESOPs or combine them together depending upon what needs to be done. So my company that I spend some of my time at, which is a picture behind me, I'm not really there, is Intrust IT and Blue Ash. So we're IT support cybersecurity company. And then the other company that I bought in February of this year is called Staffination, which is a staffing company for light industrial staffing, nothing to do with IT. So those are the two companies I currently operate. So I'll turn it over to Norm.
Thank you, Tim and Scott. Thank you for a wonderful job. I've been listening to several of the sessions the last couple of days, and just really appreciate the work you and your team have done to put this together. Part of what I'm about to tell you is mostly correct. Some of what I'm about to tell you is partially correct. So just go back to my recognition of all the things that have happened. But like Tim, my current company, Tier 1 Performance Solutions, we formed this in 2002, and now we became an ESOP in 2016. We'll talk about why that happened, how it happened, and like Tim, we're actually on an acquisition spree right now in terms of continuing to growing businesses. The ESOP is a wonderful vehicle for that, and we're looking to continue growing this business. So with that said, Tier 1 is a professional services firm. We're in the human performance space, and so getting to really what we do is we like to say we activate strategies through the people. Our main focus areas are within the Fortune 500, so large organizations with large challenges, large workforces, typically global. We, in essence, when there's a large change implemented, whether it be driven by human personnel, technology, processes, acquisitions, mergers, the faster you align that change, the people with that change, the faster you get your return on investment. So we do that across the Fortune 500. We also do about 25% of our business within the Department of Defense and the federal government. Earlier today, one of our, Dr. Terrence Andre, was talking about the Small Business Innovation and Research Program. I think we've won 40-something of those, which is roughly over $20 million in capital, in money for us to invest in the business. And we're also now in the healthcare space. We bought a clinical consulting company a couple of years ago. So we look to continue to diversify our model all around the performance of human beings. The ESOP, as Tim just mentioned, was one avenue for us. We've had opportunities to exit to a publicly traded company. We've got a lot. I'm going to go on private equity, but we think we've built a phenomenal culture in Tier 1 with typically the best places to work year in, year out. And we felt the best avenue for us, really not to exit, was more of keeping that culture and building a business that's 18 years and hopefully will be here for another 100 years. We wanted to keep it intact. So the ESOP was the best mechanism for us available to us in order to do that.
Thanks, Norm.
I'd be remiss real quick. My other founders of Tier 1 were Kevin Moore, Dr. Moore, who exited the business about 5 years ago, and Greg Harmeyer, our CEO. Many of you may know who Greg is. Greg's a phenomenal individual. We brought him as a CEO within about 6 months of creating this company. Real smart decision on our behalf. Whereas I'm a serial entrepreneur, I will create a company all day long, and I'm not concerned about much of it. Once it gets to a certain size, you need smart people to run and manage and scale these things. So Greg Harmeyer has been that guy for us, and I'd be remiss without mentioning that. And he's still with us today, running the business today.
Thanks. I know it's for both of you guys with those companies. It's been a while since you started, and we're a true startup. But I wonder if you could go back and just talk a little bit about some of the challenges you faced starting up, some of the obstacles you had to overcome. And I don't know if you had some capital you had to raise early on and how that might have went, but if you could kind of go back and speak to that a little bit. And Norm, you want to get started on that?
Yeah, gosh. I started my first company when I was 27 years old, and that wasn't 5 years ago. So there's been no lack of obstacles and challenges. And so with that said, we've raised a bunch of capital in different businesses, and there's pros and cons to doing that. And I want to talk about one of the things that I think is as important as anything else. And you heard some of that today. Tony Shipley talked about hiring internal and external, the hiring and getting people to build your team. I like to attribute that to building your partners, and partners within businesses come in about 7 different categories. One would be certainly the co-founders of your business. And so picking the right co-founders, and how does that work? It's complicated because sometimes it's going to deal with how much equity do you each get? Who gets a paycheck? Who continues working their full-time job? Who gets paid what roles you have, and things of that nature. So that's an important aspect of getting that equation right. Your other partners are going to be your financial partners, your banking relationships, your venture capital, your angels, whoever puts a dime into your business, they become a partner of your business. So those are critically important to get those right. Your legal partners, your law firms. In tier 1, we have a law firm for our general stuff, law firms for M&A. We have a law firm for a DoD business. Your accounting partners, we have a great accounting partner within Von Lehman here who helps us with that aspect of our business. You have your customers, and something I didn't hear a lot about today, but customers to me is one of my financial sources. And so picking the right customers early on to help you, those have become critical. They're great value to you. And they can also be a great detriment to you as well. Your community, our community has gotten behind us every community we operate into. And so that's another big aspect. Your community will provide and help build your brand, help build your quality, and help promote your organization. So those are critical. Of course, your people are great partners. So the whole partnership thing is important. So I want to just step back and just take another minute or two. So I was 27 years old. I just left. I'm a software engineer by trade. I'm up in Boston. I was working within the DoD area. I worked on missile programs with Raytheon, worked on black box satellite programs with GE Aerospace. And my brother was up in Nashua, New Hampshire. I was working with a group called Space Optics Research Laboratories. And every weekend I'd go up to his house and drag me down his basement. And the next morning, first he's got a generating, diamond polishing machines, generating machines, interferometers, isolation tables. And I'm thinking, what the heck are you doing with all this stuff? He's like, I want to build a business. I said, well, okay, what kind of business? And it's in the optical business. I was just finishing my MBA with my focus was on government contract. And I'm thinking, lowest qualified bidder, the lowest overhead in this space, you can actually win contracts. So wrote a business plan, got the SBA 7A loan to finance it by putting up my house, personal guarantees, and every aspect of my net worth they could get their hands on, which wasn't much at the time. Basically took a $75,000 loan out and purchased some additional equipment, and lo and behold, we created an optical manufacturing company, and that was my first foray into the business. Within a year, I realized I couldn't work with my brother, so we're back to picking the right partners. So I was able to replace myself and then move on. I went to Cambridge, worked at a software company, and then created another company called Cambridge Digital Media. So I went from a manufacturing business to a software publishing business. This was in the early 90s. Brought on 4 partners for that business. And so each one of us brought different components. And so that was pretty successful. 5 years later, we pivoted that business actually, mainly because it was in the digital media space. You could purchase our CD-ROMs or, media play. Then the internet happened. We had to pivot. And we had a lucky break through Oracle Corporation, where I had some friends and relationships. And we ended up getting into, they offered us some training education opportunities. Why? Because they wanted someone who were experts in media-based training education and what have you. So as a smart CEO, I got the call from them. I turned them down. I told them training's for sissies. I got guys with smoke coming out of the heads here in Cambridge. We don't do training. A month later, they called me again. Norm, we want to give you a worldwide exclusive. I said, oh, I told you last month. I was on a Friday. By Monday morning, I became a training company because I realized, the opportunity was there. So we pivoted the business. Fast forward, I sold that in '98 to a company in Cincinnati. We grew that business, sold that to a publicly traded company. Certified unemployable for about 6 months. I decided I've got to create another company in order to get a paycheck. So came up with the idea with Tier 1. And the idea with Tier 1 was, in essence, initially using technology to help train and educate people in performance. So 18 years later, here we are. So that was my journey. And I just want to point out, along that journey, for those of you entrepreneurs, we never had anything solved, figured out, but you're always tinkering, always figuring things out. And every one of those was a step forward for me to get more intelligent and a little bit more versed on sales, marketing, legal, people, you name it. So it wasn't a get it all done today. Each one of those steps were critically important to where we ended up getting to and to where we are today. So it's been a wonderful time.
Thanks, Norm. Tim?
Sure. So I started my company in '92 when I was in college at the University of Cincinnati. Because I had grown up with my father's company in IT and software development, I started my IT company completely separate from him while in college. Financed it on credit cards. Not a smart thing to do, but that's all I could do at the time, being 19 years old. One of the first projects that I did for a company, interconnecting their multiple offices together. The owner of the company took me out to dinner afterwards, after we had tied all of his offices together, and went to ask me what kind of wine I wanted. And I said, well, I'm not 21 yet. I can't drink yet. So he was floored and couldn't believe that he had just entrusted the interconnection and all the security of his company with a 20-year-old kid. So that my biggest challenges at the time was the fact that I was hiring people older than me, working for me, and trying to tell them what to do, and not getting the respect that I needed. So that was a difficult struggle for me. 4 years later, I sold the company and to a large organization. They kept me on as division president, and I stayed there for 11 years operating that division. And then they went through a transition, doing some strategic planning, and I bought the division back at that time. So 11 years later, I bought another company in Chicago, kept that for a couple of years and sold it. And then in 2012, really pivoted the company towards cybersecurity and cloud focus, and also determined that I wanted to implement an ESOP in the company. And the plan was by 2020 to become large enough, be profitable enough that an ESOP would make sense. So we beat all our goals and what we had planned to do in 2018. So I was able to implement the ESOP last year ahead of schedule. And that's where I am today. Still partially involved kind of as a CEO, more as the guidepost for Entrust, and then involved in these other ESOP endeavors that I am getting more and more involved outside of Entrust now.
Thanks.
Sure.
Just a reminder, if anybody has questions, I think you can forward those. Scott, do you get the questions?
I see them in the chat too. If you send them to everybody, I'll see it.
Okay. All right.
And I put my LinkedIn profile out in the chat as well. So anybody wants to connect with me, you can click there and connect.
Okay, good. Tim, Norm talked a little bit about the importance of the right partners and different relationships. Do you have similar experiences to that?
Yeah, I've gone through several partners throughout the years. When I bought the division back from the large organization, I didn't have enough cash at the time to finance the whole transaction myself and enough credit. So I had my operations manager come with me as a business owner or as a partner with me. And then she and I bought the company in Chicago, and that brought another partner into the mix. So at one point I had myself and two other partners. And we went through an issue where my original partner was causing some issue with the bank, and we had actually some concerns about defaulting on some of the debt that we had because of the way that she was structuring things and way that she was working with a bank. So we had to execute our buy-sell agreement, force her out of the company. So that was a very difficult, very, very difficult time within the organization to go through something like that, where you're forcibly removing somebody from your company and getting attorneys involved and everything. That didn't come down to a lawsuit. We were able to negotiate a pretty good exit for her. That was years and years ago. We've since paid her off and exited. She's had her own company at this time, but that short-term pain was well worth it. I'm glad that I did that. And then the partner in Chicago, a couple years after we had gone through all of that pain of forcibly removing her, He and I were talking on the phone one day over a problem we were having, some minor little issue, and all of a sudden out of the blue he goes, "I'm just done with this." And I was like, are you done with this problem or this phone call? What are you done with? And he's like, "No, I'm done with IT. I just cannot handle IT anymore. I want to go do something else." And I was like what? And he's like, I don't know. I think I'll figure it out. So he wound up, he's like, "I can stay a silent partner. You can buy me out, whatever makes sense to you." So he was operating the Chicago branch of the company. So we wound up selling that branch, and I used the funds from that to buy him out. And then he started up one of those Massage Envy franchises, multiple franchises around Chicago, totally out of IT. He's like, "I just need something else to do." But that very friendly exit, and I worked with him and he worked with me, and he and I are good friends to this day. When I'm in Chicago anymore, I'll visit him and find out how things are going. So but I've been through the gamut with partners, and definitely making sure you pick somebody you can work well with. Definitely have the understanding ahead of time when you go in. One issue we had when we acquired the Chicago location, planning for that purchase after we had made the acquisition, and we should have done it before we made the acquisition, and figuring out how that partner dynamic was going to work. We should have done a better job of that ahead of time. But I really like being my own independent owner a lot more than when I had partners. I'm able to do a lot crazier things, where in the past I had to temper my strategic plans and the ideas I wanted to do, because I always had to get consensus from my partners. And now I can head out in a different direction or make a little bit more bolder choices because of the fact that I don't have partners wanting to hold me back. So that's made a big difference for my organization. Norm?
Yeah, we could have an entire session just on partnerships. And if I ever do write a book, it's going to be Pick Your Partners Wisely, as you mentioned. So, partners are typically needed earlier on when you're not capitalized. And so also if you've got some deficiencies in your skill set. And so all the partnerships that I've had were basically for those two reasons, and which is fine. But things change in life. And so just like whether it be a marriage or other relationships you may have, life changes. Life changes something. Tim just mentioned his guys, "I'm done with IT. I've had enough. I've given what amount of years to this," and that's fine. So it's okay to shed partners as well. So I want to make that point very clear. And so the entrepreneurs on this call right now recognize if you need to have partners, then get them. I highly suggest you do, because we come with different skill sets. But then you need to have the discussion about someday we're going to want to get divorced, and that's okay. Life changes. So a couple of stories on my end. I've got two not so good ones and one really good one. And so my first one was with my own brother. As I mentioned, could not get along with my brother. And so we just looked at things very differently in the business. So I had to get out. So I got out, left him in, since he knew how to manufacture optical systems. That's what he did. I was just a business guy. So I was able to replace myself and get out of the business. And for that business went on for another 20 something years, and I helped. I was a nice friend, but nonetheless, I just couldn't stand working with my brother. The advice to you guys is don't work with family members. Just don't work with my family member. It's next partnership, the Cambridge company, wonderful. I had a guy from Hollywood, so we're doing business with Fritz Ford Coppola and folks out there in the digital media space. Another guy from Boston with me. I had the relationships with a few companies. But it just got to a point where we've got about 4.5 years in, and like Tim says, things change. We just want to do different things. The guy from Hollywood wanted to do more with that space, and I wanted to do more in the education space. And so we just had to part ways because of that, which was fine. But then the magic happens in when you find the right partnerships. And so Tier 1 today, Kevin, Greg, and I have been partners for 18 years. We still like each other a lot, and that's rare. And so my point is you get a partnership like that in terms of their team. If you stick together, you'll solve any problem. And so not the technology, not the product, you'll figure those things out. You're constantly watching, adjusting, whatever. You get the partnerships right, you will solve any problem on the planet. And I'm adamant about that. And I speak about this quite a bit. That's a key part. So, and by the way, the other partnerships real quick, don't forget, back at home with your significant other, spouse, wife, husband, children, they're partners in this too. And if you're working like Tim and I, and we all have, you're working on ungodly hours, you're traveling so darn much. If that partnership goes south, then you're in trouble there as well. So all those things to consider and keep in mind. But partnerships can be one of the things. And I'll lastly say the other partnerships of capital partners. I've family, friends, my own money, venture, angels. We've gotten money from a lot of different sources over the years of these different companies. And those partnerships can do the same thing. You sit in a boardroom with the wrong board of directors who have different, what do you want to do differently because they've given you, several hundred or $7 million. That's going to change the trajectory of your business. And so as Tim mentioned, you know what? They may not, who knows who's right, but as a CEO, Tim, you're like, I've got a passion for this. I know I'm going and people want to, those become things that stop you from attaining what you want to attain. Those are rip a business apart. So all those things in my mind need to work well together. And if they do, it's magic.
Here you talk about when you started and with your partners, your co-founders, just thinking about it from a legal side for a minute. Did you have like buy-sell agreements and purchase agreements among you and your founders when you started? And if you did, was that helpful or not helpful?
So the first thing, we didn't have buy-sell agreements until we actually started making money because there was really nothing to buy or sell. And I'm not being facetious, I'm just being honest. So as we evolved as an organization, we had an operating agreement, we had roles. So we really stuck within the roles. Greg was our CEO. He's 10 years younger than Kevin and I. And Greg, when he came on, said, "You're going to give me the keys, don't tell me how to drive the car." And so we didn't violate that. And so that was important. But so then after we actually raised our first round of capital is when our investors said, you need to have all these things in place. And so that's what prompted us to get the buy-sell agreements and all the other pieces in place. So I'm glad we have them, but at that point in time, it wasn't something we did day one.
Yep. Tim?
Yeah, the buy-sell agreements were critical for us. The ironic thing is that our buy-sell agreement was mostly written by the woman that we exited, and she had written it very much favor the company because she had assumed that we would be exercising it against our partner from Chicago. And when it was turned around and used against her, she didn't want to abide by anything that was in it, and pretty much called it null and void and improperly written, even though she was the one that was very involved in setting all the parameters inside of it. But it still gave us a place to start when we started negotiating. So yeah, it was important, but we did not follow what was in there at all.
Yeah, I think a lot of times those are documents that I think are important to enter into, and you hope you don't have to use it
right.
Down the road, but usually important to have.
Yes.
Both of you guys have talked about, ESOPs a little bit, and maybe this is a good time to go into a little bit more detail about why the ESOP worked for you, what your situation was that made the ESOP such a good alternative, and maybe, how it compares to some of the other options you may have had.
Yeah, if I could start with that. So my father's company, as I said, was a software company, and he founded that and operated it in Lebanon, Ohio, which, if you're not familiar with Lebanon, it's a small suburb of Cincinnati, not exactly a tech mecca. You'd be surprised that there's a software development company in Lebanon. And when he was getting ready to retire 16 years ago, most of the companies that were wanting to come in and acquire him were from New York, Toronto, San Francisco, Chicago, et cetera. They pretty much were planning on taking his intellectual property, his software, his client list, and closing his office, and maybe or maybe not offering jobs to his employees. And a lot of them had started the company with him in the 70s, so it had been around for quite some time. And that did not sit at all well with him. So he lives in Lebanon, really likes the city and the town, and wanted to keep that employer local. So he chose the ESOP because of the fact that he just could not see himself selling out to these larger companies that would take the company and pretty much shell it out. And for me, I saw that, and that made me a fan of ESOP. I wasn't 100% sure I was going to do that or not until I had an experience with a client of mine. So I had a client, they're $1 billion a year company located in Cincinnati. They were going around the country and they were buying other companies. They manufacture, one of the things they do is they manufacture corrugated pipe, and they were buying a corrugated pipe company in the middle of nowhere in Texas. They let me know that they're buying this company. Normally they would buy a company and operate it for several months or even a couple of years before they would fold it into their, into their headquarters. But they contacted me and said that their IT system, that this new company they were buying was so bad that they needed to cut them over and right away. Like as soon as the sale was done, they wanted to cut the systems over. So I flew I along with a team of a few other people working for me. We flew down to Texas. We got all the equipment into a hotel, got everything staged. The sale of the company went through on a Friday afternoon. We gained access Friday evening. We worked all weekend to put all the new equipment in that we needed to and set up their conference room for training of the new software they were going to use for order entry. Monday rolled around, all the employees came back into the office, walked in, and nobody had told them any of this was happening. I had to break the news to these people. The former owner had left town like a thief in the night. He took all of his personal property out of his office and was gone. This was like I said, corrugated pipe. It was like a big yard that was probably, I don't know, 10 acres or something like that, with all these big machinery and things around. So we were in the small sales office that had maybe a couple dozen people working in it. Well, the guys from the yard started hearing about this, and they started coming into the office to find out what the hell was going on with the company, yelling and throwing their tools down and quitting, and all kinds of crazy things were happening. And meanwhile, I was sitting there, and I had to stay there for the entire week doing the training and sitting alongside these people who were totally befuddled as to what happened. And to this day, I don't know if that owner left town because he was embarrassed because he couldn't keep the company afloat and it was going under and he needed somebody to come in and bail him out, or if he was embarrassed because he took all the money, made off like a bandit, and left town because he made a lot of money. And these people told me they had expected, small little town in Texas, they expected they were going to be able to buy this from him or do some, one person worked there 20 years, husband and wife. The wife worked in the office and the husband worked out as a foreman out on the shop floor. And they both expected they would have some stake and ownership in the company, and they were totally left out in the cold. I had no idea this was happening. And I came back from that, and I was between what happened with my father's company and what I'd seen there and been part of. I'm like, I definitely never want to be part of any acquisition that goes like that ever, and really saw the benefit of the ESOP. And as I looked into the benefits of the ESOP, especially now with income inequality, and all the other inequalities you see with race and sex and gender, and that the ESOP has been proven to benefit people of other races and genders and economic levels much better than any other thing that you can do in a company. So I chose to do that, and that's why I'm going out and buying other companies and converting them into ESOPs as well in the Cincinnati area.
Yeah, Tim, that sounds, the common factor is how we both got here is care about people, and you just hit it right on the head. You saw the horrible treatment of some people help build an organization, and so for us at Tier 1, we've always been a very open organization in terms of financials, everything else. Our culture is wonderful. We'd already given away 25% of our company in stock options, so we'd already made folks partial owners. And so the thing for us was driving the decision to do this type of thing was Kevin and I, as I mentioned, were 10 years older than Greg, and Kevin wanted to exit. Kevin wanted to go teach. He's in the entrepreneurship program at the University of Tampa. So our choices at that point were basically buy Kevin out because we had a buy-sell agreement, and it wasn't going to be cheap. The company had grown quite a bit. And so our choices were, okay, we're going to stop buying Kevin out. Well, that's going to take away from cash flow and potentially other dollars we want to continue investing in the business. So although it was doable, it wasn't preferable. So then we started looking at a little bit more. So what are our options? And so we then also got an offer from a publicly traded company, which just shook us up. It's like, holy cow. Yeah, we could be like Tim, like you said, all right, we could walk away with 75% of the business, but in a year or two from now, Tier 1's not going to exist. We don't think it will. They'll do something else with it. And so we had these 100-something employees at the time, and it's like, wow, well, these folks helped us build this business. This didn't feel right to us. So looking at the private equity, say all that. So then realized, run into some folks who had done an ESOP. We had thought about it a few years earlier when we had about 60 employees, but what didn't make sense to us at that time. So we revisited that, and lo and behold, it fit. It was the right thing for us to do, right thing for our organization, right thing for our people. And so we made that election in 2016. I'm happy to say 4 years later, first, we've got a lot of folks here who are basically building wealth. Tim, you hit it right on the head. I've got close to 300 folks across 9 cities. There are folks that are building wealth that would never have had the opportunity to build wealth before. So that's just wonderful and helps with the business. And the other thing about an ESOP, the company itself, the ESOP it's a trust. So it's a not too different than a 401k. In other words, it's a federal retirement plan. So the organizations themselves become tax-free entities in terms of income tax. And so what does that mean? It means instead of flowing down flowing all the profits down to the owners and paying a high amount of taxes on that, you're keeping that in your business to reinvest in your business, reinvest in your people. So utilizing some of that extra cash flow, we're out buying businesses today. We bought a few of them. And Tim's point is, it's very attractive for them and their employees to come on in and join us, because now you're going to become an owner of this company. The company you've been working, you're going to become an owner. So it's a huge attraction. And Tim, you're seeing it, we're seeing it, and we'll continue on with this journey because we truly believe we're going to just continue impacting the world, social justice, equality across folks, opportunities. I mean, this is just, it's an easy way. It's a wonderful tool to help support that.
Great. Those are 2 great examples of how an ESOP can work in a very good way. I agree with you. Do you guys, obviously from the beginning of the start of your business to now, there's been a lot of growth. And so that, I guess, involves increasing the number of customers and sources of sales that you have, and also growing those sources. Do you have any tips or just thoughts as to what has helped you with that growth over the years?
Yeah, Tim, I'll go first on this one. There's a lot of factors that go with that. Certainly, one is building a quality reputation, a quality brand where people want to purchase something from you, and that's a high level of trust. So we've always over-delivered to our customers and what have you. But then the next piece for us is always that we've grown roughly 25% every year since 2002. We've been on Inc. 5,000, that's 14 straight years, but I think only one of 2 companies in the country right now that's done that. So building in a model and a culture of growth in your business. And so constantly getting people in the culture prepared for this. It's just part of it's our fabric. It's what we've done. And then the next piece is constantly tinkering with your org structure and your roles. You've got to grow into something. You just can't grow into the same structure, the same processes. So we're constantly churning those. We're constantly reevaluating. We do it twice a year. What do we look like? What should we look like to get to this next point? And then the next thing is you need oxygen. You need capital. Right? To grow costs a lot of money. And so ensuring that you have the capital necessary to grow, it's very, very important. And I guess the last piece of that, and by the way, Tier 1, we did take a round of venture in our 3rd year, I believe, in Angel Capital. We exited them in 2008. Believe it or not, we exited them. We're highly profitable and able to give them a nice return. Since then, we've been self-sustaining in terms of cash flow and profitability, and the ESOP now even adds more to that. So having capital to invest in your business is critical in order to grow. And then lastly, another last piece is then growth strategies. Well, you can grow through your internal customer base. You can market. You can build markets. We built Chicago from scratch. Very expensive. Looking at the acquisition side where we can acquire smaller businesses, add a lot of fuel to what they do, plug them into our marketing, sales engine, plug them into our administrative and our processes, give them resources, then we can basically grow them pretty quickly. So various strategies to growth over the time period. But constantly looking at that growth profile, and so we're not slowing down. We're going to actually look to accelerate a little bit if we can. So that's been our experience.
Okay.
Yeah, for us, so the unusual thing about us is when we focused just on growth, we were on the Inc. 5,000 list for 3 years in a row. We were just focused on growth. We were chasing revenue, not necessarily profitability, and not necessarily excellence in what we did. And we just focused on growth. And when we did that, we grew, but it wasn't good growth and it wasn't good revenue. And our culture suffered. So when we took a step back, and actually we took a year and we didn't grow at all, we just went sideways, and all we did was we looked at the companies that the customers that we have recurring revenue, and we looked at those clients that weren't good fits for us and the services we were providing that weren't good fits for us, and we redid everything and refocused our services and what we were doing. And because we looked away from growth and actually just focused on ourselves and made sure that we were growing our employees and we were improving our services, our growth we did have sales and marketing and all that kind of stuff, but it made it a heck of a lot easier to sell what we had when we were delivering what we said we were going to deliver. So that made a big difference for us. The other thing that made a huge difference is we implemented a Great Game of Business, which is an open book management system, way before we did the ESOP. When I spoke to my father about his ESOP, I'm like, what would you have done differently? And he said, I would have gotten my employees into my finances a lot earlier, because when I sold the company to them, they didn't understand how it made money and they had difficulty operating it. With Great Game, my employees owned the company before we actually formally did the ESOP. So it allowed us, I had the whole company as a team working on the finances, and made us more profitable and allowed us to grow. So Great Game of Business, you can start that from day one. There's a book called Great Game of Business written by Jack Stack. It's a workbook of exactly how you can implement it, but it gets all your employees involved in the finances so that they're helping you forecast. So in the past, I would get the financial reports from my controller, 2-3 weeks into the month, and it would tell me how we did last month. Now I have employees, and every single employee in the company has at least one line item they have to watch on my finance, and we're reporting in every single week a forecast of what we think the end of the month's going to look like. So in the first week of a month, I kind of know what that month's going to look like, versus in the past I was dealing 6 to 8 weeks in arrears. So it made a huge difference for us. So that's Great Game of Business.
I'd like to emphasize that again. And gosh, I mentioned we open the books, exactly the same thing, Tim. And when people understand the implications of their decisions and the impact on the business, the better off you're all going to be. People make a lot smarter decisions when they understand the impact to the entire business. And so the education process for us on the financial side has been a little bit, it takes a little while, balance sheets, cash flows, all those things. But for the most part, when people are that invested in knowing, they make smarter decisions. And so it really works well.
This is a great book called The Accounting Game. This is not Great Game of Business. This is just a workbook, and actually walks you through operating a lemonade stand. And it is how I teach my employees how the finances work. And I've actually taught this to other business owners because they didn't understand their finances as well as they should have. So even for you as a business owner, I've had people that have taken accounting in college and said, this is better than any accounting course they ever took. So you can get this on Amazon for $20.
It's a good tip. Norm, I think when you and I talked yesterday that you said that you started the business, started Tier 1 in an incubator over in Northern Kentucky. Is that right?
Yeah.
Could you talk a little bit about your experience and just generally what you think starting up in an incubator, offers to a startup business?
Right. So we started at what was called the Madison E-Zone back in 2002. Now, I was on the board of directors of the E-Zone, and I really believed in that. Actually, when I was back in Cambridge, I was the recipient of mentoring groups, which basically brought us in and basically asked us a lot of questions and made us feel horrible, but basically made us think about operating our businesses better. So when the E-Zone was formed here in Kentucky, that was part of the innovation. 2001, I think they formed roughly. But I saw the value in it. And the reason was because I wanted to put our business into this incubator, and I wanted us to meet other entrepreneurs and have other discussions and help build our brand and help get connected. And again, in terms of the incubation that occurred down on our side was as much of a conduit down to our state legislature and economic development folks. and funds and grants and other things of that nature, but also opened you up to the community. So, exposure to Northern Kentucky University, exposure to other universities. So it's just a nice connector for us. And so we basically spent a year and a half there and grew the business. We had conference rooms, right? All the things we wouldn't have normally, but it helped us with our connections. And lo and behold, the connections we have today were born out of that incubator that we still hold true today. So hooked us up with a lot of different law firms, our accounting firms, you name it. So in that respect, it was a great benefit for the business.
Good. Yeah, and I know you're talking about the one in Northern Kentucky. I know the Hamilton County Business Center incubator I've done some work with in the past, and I've seen the same benefits accrue to the people that participate, the businesses that participate and work out of the incubator.
I'll throw in here, Mark, because I was a business coach at the business incubator prior to taking this position, and what an incubator can do for startups is being in an environment of other founders is really, really a great benefit. The networking, HCDC has business coaches that are assigned to the founders. There are a lot of resources that are brought to bear, and I think the attendees heard us say earlier that we really believe it takes time to build great companies. I think the thing that accelerators do a disservice to founders on is giving them the impression that they could build a great company in 6 months or a year, and it just doesn't work that way. And we really believe that after going through an accelerator program, we think there are great accelerator programs, but after going through an accelerator, go to a place where you can get some additional help. Incubators are a great place to do that. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you, Scott. How have you guys navigated COVID? And I know, Tim, it sounds like it didn't stop you from getting involved in a new business this year, but how has that worked out for you guys?
Yes, that was a challenge. So the company I bought, we actually closed the last week of February. I took ownership the first week of March. And the reason I bought the company is because they had been operating for 30 years. A husband and wife ran the company, all on paper, no IT based. So I saw a lot of opportunity to be able to come in there and put everything online and do everything digitally with a lot of IT technology. And I had a 6-month plan that I had already kind of figured out that I wanted to come in the door and implement. And I quickly had to do that whole plan in like 2 weeks because mid-March we had to start sending their employees home and having them work from home, and I had to give them laptops. They didn't have computers. I mean, it was total shock to the system, but their business was down 70% in mid-April from where it was in March. So it's a big change, but we're now back up. We're down about 20% from where they were last year. And it definitely affected us. The PPP money helped a lot to keep us afloat. And actually is going to turn out to be a benefit because I was able to get the IT implemented much more quickly than I expected. And I had a lot better buy-in from the employees because it was either, if I wouldn't have bought the company, it probably would have gone out of business because there was no way they could have operated during that time. So it was crazy. On the IT side, we were extremely busy helping transition companies to working from home. So we had a lot of good business during that time. So we were in good shape there. Norm?
Yeah, some of the same things. But so in terms of the tier one, I want to go back. About a year earlier, we'd asked our senior management team to model a downturn. And so what does that look like? And again, being a professional services organization, we've got a fair, majority of our employees are full-time employees, but some of them are contractors. So we basically ratcheted that up in terms of, so it gives us some variability in our delivery model. And so if we have a downturn, we can start shedding some of our contractors. And so that's part A. Part B, we're a distributed organization anyhow. We operate out of 9 cities in the U.S. and we allow folks, always have a lot of folks to work from home if you like. I mean, we work a lot collaboratively, so we've already built in to do that, which made a lot of sense. The thing that hurt us was our biggest customer was Delta at the time, and several $millions a year. And within 30 days, you lose a big chunk of revenue. So it was quite a challenge for us to redeploy a bunch of our folks. And the other aspect, again, we're a horizontal business. We're operating different verticals. I think I mentioned we're able to move a bunch of folks to our DoD contracts because we could accelerate those. So the net of it, and then the PPP was helpful. The net of this is we're down about 20% for the year, but we were able to do that without missing a beat for the reasons I just mentioned. So we're still, we started hiring again. We're buying companies now again. So we're seeing, we've got a good purview of what's going on across the country, and things are picking back up again. Even Delta's back. So, it's starting to happen again, but it was definitely a shocker. I mean, it wasn't something immediate. And the other thing was the impact on your morale. People are scared. And I'll be honest, guys, talking about this upcoming election, it's a concern of ours. This country is too polarized. We've got employees that come from stretch from one political spectrum to the other. And so wondering what's going to happen with that as the next shock to an organization is in terms of productivity and even in terms of your culture. What happens if, right? If someone says, I'm a fan of someone Biden, I'm a fan of Trump, I'm a fan of now all of a sudden that discourse comes into your organization, and it's kind of like, okay, we want to be able to address that, but guys, we got a business to run still. So there's some challenges ahead, I think, not just because of COVID, Black Lives Matter, and now the election is going to impact all of us. So stay tuned, but hopefully our culture will deal with it, and hopefully we can just have honest, good dialogue. People give people space. People allow people to provide their opinions, and we don't get, we're not here to attack anybody. We will need to respect that and work through our differences, and I think that's critically important for all of us. So COVID was step one of what we see as a three-step issue here going on in our country this year.
Okay. I think we only have a couple minutes left. Do you guys have anything else that you'd like to address, or any other tips for the participants that on things that we haven't had a chance to talk about?
So I put in the chat some links to a Rutgers study on how ESOPs benefit gender and racial wealth gaps, reduce those, and then a crowdcast that I did for was it for Queen City Angels, or maybe it was ACDC, for why an ESOP exit is good, and then also a link to an organization, a fund actually in Cincinnati called becomeworkerowned.org that has $3 million available for organizations that want to transfer to employee ownership. And there's also a company or an organization in Cincinnati called Co-op Cincinnati that helps organizations with resources if they want to become a co-op, which is different than ESOP, or if they want to become ESOPs. You'd have to be profitable and larger to be able to undertake an ESOP versus a co-op. You can be just starting out and set yourself up in that structure.
Tim, that session you did was with us, so thank you.
Okay.
That
Sure.
was an e-Kickstart. Thank you.
I'd like to just emphasize for the folks here, the sessions I dialed into today were fantastic, and all of them are correct. The advice that I heard from the other entrepreneurs, from panelists, were just spot on. The one thing that I came away with, however, is this, trying to go back, there's a fair amount of things that I heard today that should happen the day you start your business. But there are a lot of things I heard today is you got to evolve into things. So don't try to fix it. Don't try to do everything at one time. It took 8 years, and I'm 8 years for Tier 1 to figure out how to scale its business. It just took, we're smart guys. We've already had entrepreneurs. We've been there, done that. It took us 8 years to figure out this business model and how to do our business. So my point to everyone is you use these best practices, get your advice, but you can't put everything and deploy everything, all the things you hear about day one. Sometimes you're going to evolve into things. The principles don't change, the values don't change. And Tim, I'm just applaud you for the business you've built. Your principles never change. Your values never change, but things along them. So my point is, watch your business, manage your business, recognize at this point, if you want to continue growing and scaling, you're going to change over that time, and it's okay. just plan for that and make it part of your culture. Get comfortable with it. It's not easy. And so if you're rowing the boat on your own, it's hard to do it. But if you've got a culture and people that believe in you and your leadership, and then you'll get there.
Tim and Norm, thank you very much. That was, your insights were great. Your ideas, your tips were, I'm sure, well appreciated. And thanks for taking your time. Scott, I think our time is up.
We're right at the top of the hour. Mark, thank you for being the moderator. Tim and Norm, you guys have become friends. I really appreciate your knowledge and expertise. Thank you for your support of the Queen City Angels. Thank you for being speakers today, panelists, and I look forward to collaborating with you again in the future. Norm, we got a lot of extra work to do together coming up.
Yes, we do. And thank you, everybody, as well. Appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Norm.
Yeah.
Thanks, Scott, for having us.
Thank you. Take care, guys.
The rooms are closing and people should be hopping back onto the main session.
All right, that's great. We'll give everybody another minute or so.
Cool.
Oh.
Everybody put your video on so I can take a screenshot, please.
My video is not working. I mean, the host stopped it.
Well, if you can't,
There you
that's
go.
okay.
You can start again.
There you go. Well, first off, I want to thank everybody that mentored this afternoon. It's one of the aspects of the boot camp that our participants really, really appreciate the most. So thank you so much for volunteering your time and doing that. We really, really do appreciate it.
Welcome.
Hey, Scott, if you're going to take a picture, can you do that so those of us that have a floor can roll off?
Sure. I'm right at a point where I'm about to take a quick snapshot. So if you want to roll off, that's fine. I don't see you, Ann, so no problem.
So I have a question. So you'll be sending all these PowerPoints later, right? In the email?
What's that?
You'll be sending the presentations later in the email or through a box site or something.
Yeah, I do plan on doing that. One of the things that, well, you heard from Tom Humphrey yesterday about the copyright and releases and whatnot. So one of the things that I needed to do that I didn't do is I need to have all of our speakers sign a release form. So once I get that done, I'll be have the freedom to actually send their information out to you. So I don't think that's going to be a problem, but I will keep you posted. There's going to be a whole packet of things that you're going to get post-event, including a book and some links and some other information. So bear with me on that. Be looking for that. That's part of the reason why we asked for your physical mailing address. So be looking for some things from us in the mail coming up.
Scott and Brittany or Bethany, are you guys going to be sharing our contact info with the people that we met with?
Yeah,
sure.
That's awesome.
Sure, be happy to do that.
Great.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah. Attendees, if you could all shoot me an email and just let me know who you met with. We had to change up some of the assignments a little bit. So just shoot me an email and I'll make sure I connect you.
Yeah, sorry for a little bit of the confusion there. We had some founders that didn't end up wanting to be mentored, so or didn't show up into their room, so we had to make some quick adjustments. So thank you for bearing with us. I know that some people had to wait for a while, and some people maybe even didn't get placed. So appreciate your patience with us on that. So before I let you all go, I want to thank you so much for participating in the boot camp this year. One of the things that I try to do after the session is over is to get your feedback. And so I'm going to start out by asking you, what about this boot camp did you like the most? What were some of the strengths, the positive things that you took away from it?
After shower, and there is the floor.
Anybody want to start out?
I'll start. And Scott, because as a mentor, I just want to say I commend you and Bethany and everyone for having the courage to pull this off in a virtual world. So, I thought it was really good. It's my first time participating, but I think it worked out well.
Thank you. It wasn't without its challenges, and I give Bethany a lot of credit for handling things, a tough situation under pressure. Thank you. Yeah, it was definitely, we were very concerned about how it's going to work out in an online environment versus in person. I had really gotten to the point where I had hit my stride handling the boot camp in person, and then having to move it over to online. There were a lot of new and exciting things to deal with. So thank you for that, Karen. Other comments, or did we wear you out so much over 2 days you got nothing left?
I would just, if I could add, I'd say, there was tremendous insight in really all of the presentations. I think the social media one really stood out for me. Really appreciate the mentoring session. I would have loved to have another half hour, 45 minutes with the team, with those gentlemen, just kind of more feedback. That was probably the thing I was looking forward to the most.
Well, what we'll do in our packet back to you is that we do a program called Morning Mentoring with HCDC, and I don't know that we fully explained that, but we do a 1 hour session very similar to what you experienced today, and we recruit 3, 4, 5 mentors to sit in with you, and so many of you can have another opportunity to do morning mentoring if you like. And we'll send you out the link to apply for that if you're interested.
Would you want to take that up with ethanol machine?
Yeah, hey Scott, that'd be great. A few things from my perspective. I really like the connectivity between each of the sessions. When you think through kind of like, and I know that was purposefully done by you guys, so awesome. There was like a really cool, distinct flow from the first session to now, and I really applaud that, especially over 2 days and like a lot of topics to be covered, and the timing of getting everybody available within that work stream or within that kind of like pattern. So commend you guys on that. And then I really enjoyed the breakout session. I'm more of an introvert by nature, so the more intimate, the better, the more comfortable I am with talking. With discussing and pulling and just pulling great feedback and great content from some of the experts that I talked to. So that was a really fun part of the 2 days.
Scott, let me just add, first of all, thank you for including me this year. I think one of the opportunities that you have going virtual is you got folks like me who don't necessarily live in Ohio, or since I live in Indianapolis, that you can tap these resources. Obviously, you don't want to lose your Cincinnati flavor, but obviously a virtual virtual reality or real-time type of boot camp is quite effective in terms of bringing in additional resources that you may not have otherwise had.
Well, thank you, David. That was something that I recognized, and that's why I was able to recruit Ben Pigeon from Vision Tech to be a panelist, and
great.
And Mike Eckert from New Orleans to be a panelist also. So we got more than just a local angel investor viewpoint.
Perfect. I didn't realize that Ben was part of the group. Good person.
Yeah. Amber, I'll put you on the spot. What did you think of the boot camp, and are there things that we could potentially do together with the Air Force? You're on those. There you go.
No, I appreciate you allowing me to attend. I think it was good to see kind of where these folks are at and what they're trying to do with their businesses. And I just met with John and Bob and Tom. Sounds like a radio station, but you know, you guys as investors, and we were just talking about you know, just the way that like the SBIR program has changed in the last couple of years, and how you know, the way that it had been going before, it was a lot harder to get in and get opportunities with the government. There's still challenges there, so I'm not going to say there isn't, but you know, I think the Air Force at least is trying to lead the way in the DoD and making it easier to do business with the government and give opportunities to startups. And my son's trying to walk around. He's got home from daycare.
Air Force has been very innovative in how they've handled the SBIR grants, I think. I think you guys have really kind of led the way in the DoD in particular.
Where's Daddy and April? Gotta love it, man. But yeah, no, I think there's a lot of opportunities still, and you know, that's what we're looking at from the DoD perspective, is trying to get the new and emerging technologies into the government. So again, we have a lot of work to do, but I think there's still there's a lot more opportunities than there were previously. In the last couple of years, there have been a lot of pushes from our leadership to make that happen.
Thanks for participating, Amber. Other perspectives? What could we have done differently?
Hey, Scott, if you don't mind.
Yeah, Steve.
I love that you threw me in that group with the three the interrogators. It was a lot of fun. They really were.
That wasn't accidental, Steve.
That was yeah. I could have had a whole day of that. That was fantastic. I got a half a page of notes just in those few minutes. Thank you. The whole event was great. You know, that I'll just have to say I've known Scott for a while, and I was arrogant at first when he first said you need to come to this, and I thought, yeah, what could they teach me? Well, he taught me for 2 days. It was great. It was there were lots of really good things. I've got lots of notes and things to take action on. So thanks for pushing me.
Yeah, thanks for coming, Steve. We hope that if you guys took away some value over the last couple of days, that you'll be advocates and fans. Every year we're one of the things that I've had a challenge with over the years is just promoting this program. It's so exponential. You know, you have to go through it to realize how great it is, and it's hard to market that. It's hard to really communicate that in print, in tweets, or brochures or whatnot. So be a cheerleader for us if you can. Let other people know about it. I think given the fact that I can do this online, there may be an opportunity where I can maybe do this more than once a year. Obviously, there's a lot less overhead, not having to reserve a room and food expenses and whatnot. So we'll see how that works out in the future. But if there are any suggestions out there for what we could have done differently or better.
Steph, what you could look at is basically you have Ben Pigeon there, and Ben in the past has done a workshop or retreat. You may want to partner with him in the future, or with other groups around the Midwest. Obviously, this format, in terms of being virtual, really lends itself to that. You bring in a bigger pool of participants, as well as bringing in a bigger pool of experts, me excluded.
Well, thanks for that, David. I think this year, because we ended up pivoting and doing it online, originally I had thought about not even doing the boot camp this year. So I ended up having a shorter period of time to work on it and get it marketed. So with more lead time, I don't think things are going to change next year. I don't think we're going to be doing in-person meetings for a while. So I think I'll have more lead time next year to market it and collaborate and work with some other angel groups.
I agree with you, Scott. I didn't mean to cut you off. I don't see anything changing much till the end of next year, even then, which will give you a lot more time.
No, I don't either.
Unfortunately.
One thing that I've learned being involved with the Angel Capital Association is there are just so many smart people out there. I learned from other angel groups, other angel group leaders. There's just so much expertise in this country, and there's just so much that can be brought to bear for entrepreneurs. So I hope I can collaborate with some other angel groups and other angel investors. Additional comments?
I could add,
chance to let me know.
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes. So I've spoken about the alignment of your presentations the last couple of days. Everything was awesome. Home run out of the park. Another thing I wasn't expecting was the ESOP. So that's something that I've had to consider strategically in how we're going to distribute our and meet expectations, right? So creating different distribution channels. That is something that I've been considering and never would have expected. So,
that's great. Well, Tim is very accessible, and so is Norm. So those are great guys for you to tap into.
Awesome. Thank you.
Joel, you asked when is the next QCA event? Any networking events or group outings? Probably next month. In October and November, we're going to start our eKickstart series back up. That's a monthly technology speaker series. Tim Redigan's been a speaker. We've had deal attorneys be speakers. I've had numerous entrepreneurs as speakers for the eKickstart, where they just talked about their journey, and really, really great sessions that we put on over the years. So I would urge you to maybe go to our website and sign up for our get into our database so that you can potentially be apprised of anything that's going on in QCA, future events.
Hey, Scott.
Yeah, Brandon.
Yeah, I just want to say this was super amazing both days. I was almost afraid to go into my breakout room because I had so much information from all the sessions. But if this is how good you guys are virtually, I'm curious to see how much better you guys be in person. This was off the charts.
Well, I'm glad you could make it, Brandon. I guess it was Willie Hill that got you here, right?
What did you say?
Was it Willie Hill that got you here?
Well, Ann Mooney sent me the link, so as soon as she sent me that, I looked at some videos. I knew I had to come through. So thank you for having all of us.
Yeah, that's great. We're glad you can make it. Well, you got a long journey ahead of yourselves, and we're going to be there for you at every turn. We'll do whatever we can to help you along the way. We don't exist if we don't have good entrepreneurs that we can invest in. So that was the whole purpose behind the creation of this program back in 2001. I'm happy we've been able to evolve it and change it over the years and adapt it to changing times. And we're going to continue this in the future because we feel it's our responsibility to give back to entrepreneurs and share the wealth and share the knowledge and experience and education and anything we can to help you to be successful. So if there are no other comments at this point, I think that's the conclusion of the Entrepreneur Bootcamp for 2020. Thank you so much, everyone. Take care. Good luck to everyone.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.